Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Beirut Banyan podcast.
Before we start, let's give a round of applause to these two gentlemen, Rayyan and Alexi. They deserve it. Audio video wizards. I don't know how they do this stuff. I'll start by announcing a few things. That it's an honor for me to take part in Beirut Center of Photography's Photo Week, the third Photo Week. And I couldn't imagine, a better person to talk with about photography and all that it entails other than Patrick Baz. And this is long overdue. We talked about doing this some 3-4 years ago, and now we're doing it, finally. So let's give a round of applause to Patrick Baz.
Thank you.
I'll explain how I was introduced to this man's work. A few years ago, I was online looking for 1986, 1987 images from the war. I was doing a bit of particular research and peculiar research on the war of the camps. And somehow, after spending hours at looking at very violent, very gory images, I found Sylvester Stallone. And thankfully, when I met Patrick, he gave me this book. He's in it. Several photographers are celebrated together. I'll upload this to the episode, but here you have Lebanon's Sylvester Stallone. It's page 32 of Generation War, and I'm going to let you guys actually pass this around. This, of course, is not Sylvester Stallone, but I was very curious at who exactly took that photo, and I would have never imagined it was you, Patrick. And
I was very young.
You were very young, and I tagged you on Instagram, and then we became friends. You were very generous. You invited me to your home. We got to know each other better. I also got to know your wider work, thankfully, because you gave me some of your work. And we're going to dive into these subjects today. But before we get into what's happening right now, whether it's Palestine on the news, whether it's the Palestine Hotel 21 years ago in Baghdad, or whether it's Beirut altogether and the tragedy we know best, I want to go back to the beginning.
To the
beginning of what a 12-year-old was doing at the onset of the Civil War, and why 5 years later you would be already a photographer in your own right. So going back to the childhood, living on the front line, and the initial phase of you becoming a photographer.
Well, funny about Palestine, it looks like it's under my skin because I fought Palestinians, I married a Palestinian, and I lived in Hotel Palestine. So, so yeah.
When I was in that order.
When I was 12 years old, I just grew up on the on what was the demarcation line. It's the green line. It's just like I was here. That was almost my neighborhood. I mean, a few blocks from here. And war was normality for me. It's when my parents took me to Europe, like Switzerland and France. I mean, I couldn't adapt because that was not normality for me. Normality was living in a war zone. And then after that, of course, I mean, you start growing up, coming back to Lebanon. Your friends are fighting. You want to fight with them. You want to look like them. They're the elders. You carry a gun like almost every teenager in the 70s and the 80s, and then I realized that I couldn't fire or kill at anyone, but in the same time I was interested by photography, but without knowing what photography is. Let's say I didn't study photography. I just borrowed the camera of my father. It's a Contaflex 1963. and a reminder that we used black and white films, even again without knowing what that was. It was like my first photos were, I was like 16, 17, and I recall I was sitting with Philippe Araktenji, and he was preparing his exhibition, photo exhibition, and he was like, "Is this your photo or my photo?" And I said, like, "We don't know," because we were sharing the same camera.
Yeah.
There was one film in the camera, and we used to click, not knowing what we were doing. Again, I mean, it's just click, and then load, and then the camera was there, and then Philippe says, "Give me the camera. I want to take this photo." And at the end, when you process the negative, and you don't know who took what and what, and we had like 24 frames and then 36 frames, and then came the color films, and so it was an experience. And then we started with another friend who's a photographer, Eli Bekhazi, like to make some pocket money, to buy films. We used to go to Mont La Salle and shoot sport competition and sell the prints to competitors that we used to process and print at his father's lab because he was an architect. I mean, it was like a totally different approach to photography than people have now.
The younger Patrick Baz is something I have to imagine. And that's because I associate you as who you are right now, meaning a sophisticated photographer, even when you're 12 years old, which is not true. You're a child. And Philippe, I actually saw his play a few months ago at Monod. And a lot of those images are Civil War images. And it's important to remember these are childhood memories, not professional memories. So allow me to do one thing, which I haven't done before on the podcast. 6 or 7 weeks ago, you were sitting right next to this wide lens camera, and in your chair was Christina Assi.
Habibti.
And she's not 12 when she meets you. She's, I think, maybe 19 or 20, but she's young. It's a very young age. Whether you're 12 or 19, these are kids. And she comes to you seeking really your advice on what it's like to be a conflict photographer. And I'll remember this forever. You said, don't do it. And she, of course, then pursues the same career you did. When you're a kid, did you have someone you turned to for advice? Was there a mentor, or even not necessarily Lebanese? I know you spent time in France as well. So is there anyone that you search for maybe some advice? No.
At that time, we're talking was the most photographed conflict and mediatized conflict was Vietnam.
Yeah.
And the Vietnam War stopped just before the Lebanese war started. And for me, conflict photography was photographers from the Vietnam War.
Mm.
And I had books from Tim Page, from Catherine Leroy, Françoise de Mulder, and many others. And I was fascinated by war photography, and my reference was the Vietnam War. But when I started professionally at the age of 18, I had no one to help me understand what I was doing and what should I do. I just had people trying to push me forward, like Pierre sitting here, and Jacques Dabrian, who was like driving me around because, I was a kid. We were all kids, let's say. Like 1 or 2 years different, but we were all kids. Yeah. And me, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I was just like having my cameras and running around, and there was something happening here. I didn't feel like going there. And that was what Pierre reminding me, like, you were like lazy. I said, yeah, I was like, I didn't know what I was doing until the age of, I would say, 23, 24, when I realized that I started making money out of this. But the reason why I started making money, it's not because I was a good photographer, not at all. It's because Hezbollah started kidnapping foreigners, and that was in 83, 84, 85, and there were no foreigners left. So the media outlets started relying on local photographers. But for media outlets to rely on local photographers, they were looking for, of course, for good photographers, but primarily for people they could talk to.
So before we get into the, let's say, maturing of a career that's already underway, you mentioned at 18, that was the first time you really maybe could self-identify yourself as a photographer. I hope I do the math right. That's 1981.
In fact, my first professional pictures were I took them when I was 17, and that's a funny story because I was in Paris, okay, and a friend calls and says, "There's a car bomb in Paris next to your parents' house, not far from your parents' house." I said, "We're in Paris." He said, "Yes, it's Rue Marbeuf in Paris." And it was in 82, it was Watan al-Arabi. And it was an Iraqi paper. And there was a car bomb next to this Iraqi magazine, in fact. Yeah. And since I always wanted to do, I wanted to do this job. And I had a fake press card. And that was easy in the 80s because you just like cut a piece of carton, put the the colors of the French flag.
My Lebanese driver's license looks like this now.
It was easy to make. So, and I showed up at this car bomb site, and imagine my 17-year-old look and my cameras, and they let me in. And they're like, "Press, So they let me in, and I started taking pictures, and that was my first experience with how the media used to work. Like, a 17-year-old kid showing up at Paimach or Gamma, which was like one of the major photo agency or whatever, and they were like, "No, we had photographers there. Go process your films and show us what you did." And I didn't have money to process my films. And I shot like dozens of films. So until a friend of mine, one of my mentors in the profession, was the chief editor of L'Express, introduced me to George Abu Adal, who was the owner of Usbu al-Arabian magazine. And he told him, like, there's this kid who took photos of the car bomb. And so he took the films, and for him it was like very interesting to have an exclusive coverage. I don't know how the pictures looked like anyway. I saw them later in the magazines, but when I took them, it's not like today you look at your photos and you know what you're doing. I had no clue of what was in my films, my rolls. So he took the films and he sent them to Lebanon, and they were very happy to have like exclusive coverage of the car bomb in Paris. And he told me, whenever you go back to Lebanon, just get in touch with my son, and you'll work with them. So that was my first encounter with like my professional encounter.
This initial encounter with violence is, in a way, I think there's a line in your work that cannot escape conflict. With the exception of the occasional photo shoots in Paris that I see you doing, I always associate you less with Cannes and more with Carnage. You're young, you're in France, you're witnessing a car bomb in Paris, and your first real assignment is 1981 Beirut. So the draw...
82.
Oh, sorry, 82.
In Rue Marbeuf. That was not my assignment. My first real assignment as a professional was 82 with magazine.
So, sorry, 1982. So
yeah.
You're still a kid.
Hmm?
You're 19. The Israeli...
18. 18.
You're better at math than I am.
Yeah, 82, 18.
18. you're encountering an event that would change the country's society permanently. That's the Israeli invasion, the Israeli siege of Beirut. You're also trying to make sense, I think, of two things at once. What it's like to be a conflict photographer at such a young age and to survive in Lebanon too. So that dance at the age of 19, can you describe it to me in a way that would make sense today? In other words, is it really just a matter of survival day in, day out? Or did you feel, and I'm going to guess this is more like it, that even during the middle of carnage, it's still Beirut. There are pockets that you feel relative calm. There's a bubble that you maneuver around, and you can negotiate a bit. But I'd like you to bring that moment to life, because you're young, and you're also documenting something that most of us don't have a relationship to.
Look, I'm young, I'm rebellious. My first, let's say, encounter with occupation was 82. Although, I mean, technically, I grew up in this part of Beirut, and I took part in the war, but in this part of Beirut. But I was like, for me, it was an occupation, and it was like the story of my first encounter with occupation is very interesting because I worked with magazine, Asbu al-Arabi, and they told me that their photographer at that time isn't like keen of covering conflicts.
Their local photographer.
Yes. So if I mind going with the reporter, was Scarlett Haddad at that time. I will never forget my first assignment, and she told me that she had arranged a trip to the airport with the police, and because they were the only ones they considered neutral, so they could like drive around and. So I said, fine, let's go there. And for me, it was like crossing into, because, you know, it was like Jounier was the exit, you know. So the airport, although my father was station manager of Air France at the airport, so we went there. And it was like interesting for me to cross to the other side. And we reached the airport, and I told her, let me walk you around. And she said, how come? And the police officer was like, I said, look, my father was station manager here, and I know it by heart, because if you look at airports in the 70s and the 60s, they don't look like airports now.
Yeah, right.
I mean, there was no security. You could like just walk around, go to the tarmac, you know. Yeah. And I was spending like days, Sunday and Saturday with my father. He used to take me around and visit planes, and you know. So I knew the airport like my, you know, like my playground, and we went there, and then I took them to the tarmac, and the police officer was like, no, we can't go there. I said, come on, I'll show you around. And they were like this Middle East Airlines wrecked plane, burned out plane, and then we were obliged to hide because the Israeli soldiers were like dismantling MEA planes, throwing chairs around. And then I went to see my father's office. I was curious to see his office.
Yeah.
And
he's there at the time.
The office was there. Yeah, he was. I mean, they left, but the office was there. Okay, so everybody left, but right. I mean, the office was there. And then I saw like tickets, airplane tickets. Yeah. And the airplane tickets at that time were not like today. They were like like a carbon
right. Yeah.
Like four copies, like written by hand, etc. So it was like all over the floor, and then I grabbed like 3 of them, put them in my in my jacket, and then I went home.
Went to travel.
And then I went home, And I said, okay, my father will find out that I was there by looking at the papers, right? At the magazine, because at that time, again, there were no social media. Everything was in the magazines. And
I don't know if it's still being passed around, but it's page, I think, 38 or 39 of Generation War.
Yeah.
There's a photo Patrick took of one of those planes bombed out. Is the book still somewhere in the room? Yeah, could you bring it actually to the front?
So,
thank you.
so I said, I left the ticket on his bedside.
Yeah.
And I told him, I found them in your office at the airport.
So I recommend this book, by the way, because it's not just Patrick, it's a multiple conflict photographers.
There is Aline in the book sitting
Aline's
here. There is George Azar.
Is
who's
George
sitting
here?
over? Yeah,
There he
George is
There
there.
he is.
See the white hairs and the white beard. And there's like 3 other photographers.
So it's
There's
page,
Jacques. I don't know if he's here.
page 31. Get your hands on this book if you can.
No, it's a collector.
Oh, really?
It's not
I'll
available
sell it
in
for
the market.
$1,000 tonight.
But you can ask Aline and George and for pictures. Anyway, so I left the tickets, the vouchers on my dad's son bedside, and I said, I found this in your office. And it's very interesting because, well, we had an argument. It's like, what were you doing at the airport? And I explained to him, this is what I want to do. This is the job I want to do. And I know they're very proud of me today, but it was difficult at the beginning. And they finally dismantled the black market Air France ticket black market in Tel Aviv, because all the tickets were stolen and being sold on the black market in Tel Aviv. And from the serial number of the 2 tickets I collected from his office, they managed to track the whole tickets that were being sold on the black market.
You know what's interesting? And I'm going to interrupt here. Everyone I talked to that covered this moment in time has a lot of anecdotes to share.
Mm-hmm.
And the anecdotes are coming in parallel to a nightmare, which is happening in Beirut. I was fortunate to speak to George Azar several times.
Well, you should speak to Aline next time.
Next time, Ali.
Aline is the first female photojournalist in Lebanon and the Middle East, yes.
Knowing that we're in good company tonight, it's a generation that honed their craft during war. I'm not going to try to focus on your age, more on your memories.
You can. I'm not ashamed of my age.
All of you have memories of things that none of us can relate to,
Correct.
and that's including what it's like to be a photographer. So the manual experience, can you bring that to life? What it's like literally to lug around all this stuff, trying to capture moments. I think that in itself is a story, trying to make sure everything is ready all the time. We take things for granted now, but that's not the digital age.
It's mainly social media, I think.
No, but what it's like back then.
Well, back then it's interesting because we had like different. What's interesting for us from this generation, and we keep talking about it, is that we've seen the evolution of photography from the negative to the AI today. So it's a big evolution. But
And it's really your generation that saw the whole
and it's
transition.
very interesting.
Yeah.
But even when we started in the 80s, we started with black and white films. Okay, so we had to process the films and we had to print. And then came the era of, in the same time, more or less, the slides, the positive, and transparency, sorry, it's called transparency. And then we had the color version of the negative. So we used to work for me as a freelancer. I used to work for different kind of media. So the black and white used to go for Reuters because I was stringing for Reuters. So we were carrying like 3 cameras, and there were no zoom at the time. It was fixed lens.
So sorry, you had 3 separate cameras.
Yes, 3 separate cameras with like 3 different lenses. and at the back of the camera we had like a tiny frame where we could put the brand, or just to know if it's a black and white or color we're shooting. And then we had like tape on the top of the camera, and so the black and white would go to the wire service, because at that time they didn't use color. And the transparency would go to magazines like Time Magazine, Newsweek, etc. So it was a different way of shooting, and it was a different way. And I was very bad at this, and believe me, I didn't realize what I was doing. I didn't know what I was doing, because today the difference is that you see your photo when you shoot.
Right.
But before, you couldn't see anything. You
So
just
sorry
like,
to interrupt. These
Yeah.
you're carrying on you 3 fixed lens. There's
plus the bag.
plus a bag. So
Plus
3
the bag,
cameras,
because you
plus a
had the bag with like other lenses and films, and had pockets full of, you know, so yeah.
and you're not able to see what you're shooting. You're literally
You just shoot.
Yeah.
And you only, well, we've reached the technology where we had like the light meter. At least we could read the light a little bit. And we couldn't shoot at night. That was like the other thing. It's like
Right.
after a specific hour, it's over. And when you reach like, today, we were talking with George about it. Today you can reach like 36,000 ISO to, I don't know. I mean, ISO goes like infinity. When we would push a film to 800 ISO or 1600 ISO, it was like, are you sure about the result? No, but something is happening, and I'll shoot, and then we'll see when we process what will come up from
I know this because you told me in private once. You remember the first moment you experienced the ISO feature.
Exactly.
That's 1987 or 88. Is that right? In late 80s.
No, when I experienced the new ISO. Before it was ASA.
Sorry.
It was ASA. And
Right.
when the digital era arrived, they called it ISO.
Right.
International Sensibility Organization. Before it was like, I don't know what was ASA before? I don't remember, but whatever. So yes, now the cameras, like the digital cameras, read lights that your eye doesn't see.
Yeah.
And then pitch black, you have a photo.
But in terms of doing that with 3 cameras at once, with limited features, just because technology hasn't evolved enough at that time, is it in itself a frustrating experience to know whether or not your work will actually materialize? In other words, you capture something that makes sense to you. The processing, sending the image, what is it? I guess back then, I don't know how you would.
There was like 2 different ways of sending the image. The black and white that was sent by Reuters, AFP or AP, they would pick a photo first, like from the negative, print it, type the caption on a sticker, a tape, stick the tape with the caption on the frame of the print, and then put it on a drum that used to be called the belinograph, or it's like it's a drum, and there is a reader, and you connect it to a phone. So if you have a good international line, because we're talking international line, the photo would take like 20 minutes to reach London, Paris, or wherever. If you had a bad international line, the picture would cut, and then you have to sit in the office for like all over the night to send your photo. And sometimes your photo will land after the deadline, because there is something that we all experienced, is like you risk your life for nothing.
Exactly.
Because your picture would never be published.
Right.
For many reasons. One of the reasons is that like there is like 1 international page in most of the newspapers, or 2 international pages in most of the newspapers, and there's not enough room for photos. Today you can publish everything anywhere, anytime.
Right.
And we could go risk our life. It happens with Aline, with me, with George, wherever. And you come back, and there's no phone. We're not talking, you just go, you're by yourself.
So I'm going to enter terrain that's a bit delicate here. You've already expressed 2 things, I think. A real passion for this type of work, and also a willingness to take risks even when all this work could not add up to much other than you saw it.
Yeah.
And so that
because
kind
it's
of,
a passion. It's
right,
not,
right.
you're not doing it for for fame. You're not doing it for money. Now it's different. You do it to get more followers or whatever you do. But at that time, if you did not love it, stop it.
So this is where I want to get a bit delicate, because in a way, thankfully, you encouraged me to open this door. I wouldn't have felt comfortable had you not suggested. You're still young. You're in your prime.
Yeah.
I mean, you're in your 20s when all of this is happening. You've seen enough already for a 19-year-old during 1982. It's not the most stable career, but you're doing it because you love doing it. And I've heard you say this several times. You've experienced this adrenaline, this rush that is more like a drug addiction than a career. Almost like there is a connection that is deeper than just passion. And there's alluring, I'm just quoting you now, alluring for conflict. You're seeking conflict. Even when there's no conflict next to you, you're going to look for conflict.
Correct.
Can you connect
But you have two different passions here. Photography is a passion.
Yeah.
Okay. War is a drug. Okay. So you mix them both,
Yeah.
it becomes heavy drug. And so it is, yes. Why did I mean, I started with photography, but it was also, as you said, the adrenaline kick. It was the adventure. It was the life in war zones, in conflict zones, that had nothing to do with normal life. I mean, what's normality? But my normality was war. So, and then I started chasing wars. Yes, I started chasing wars when I had, how would I put it? My parents considered that it was a hobby until I was hired by AFP. But I was making more money when it was a hobby than when I got hired by AFP.
That's funny.
But I spent all my money, and I did not realize. But that's another discussion. I mean, it's like when I started. I told you, when I started working here in '83 and '84, and I was making loads of money because we were really the very few who would speak 3 languages. And the reason why, I told you again, I was not a good photographer at all. I mean, I didn't know what I was doing. I was just shooting what I was seeing. But I would pick up the phone, speak French and English to an editor in New York or in Paris. That's what other photographers who would be sometimes better than me were not capable of doing. So, and there were no foreigners left. And at that time, you could barely find an Arab-speaking editor or photographer or journalist in a newsroom in the West.
Let me push a bit on the adrenaline.
Yeah.
Is there a moment you realize that there's a problem in what that there's a mix-up between war and photography psychologically? Because I've heard you say it in retrospect several times, but is there a moment you realize yourself that you're drawn to something that's, in a way, psychologically threatening? And is it
at the end?
At the end.
At the end.
Okay, so in retro,
Well, at the end, when you realize that there is something wrong going, in your brain, in your attitude, in your social life, in your private life, in your behavior, social behavior. So yes, at the end you start. But sometimes it depends. It depends also what triggered your what we call the PTSD, the post-traumatic stress disorder. It's a burnout that triggers it.
But allow me to go. We're gonna fast forward to the end, but I want to. Do you ever self-examine a moment here, let's say as a kid, where you first realized you're drawn to something that's...
No. For me, as I told you, it was normality.
Yeah.
I mean, it's. But then when I started working with AFP, and then I went to Bosnia and to Somalia and to, I mean, my second war, I would say, was Sarajevo, where I went there to. I need to mention something that before we go further, that it's all on voluntary basis. Like, there's not a single newsroom that would force you to go to a war zone or a conflict zone. They suggest, you say yes or you say no. You can't force anyone.
So these assignments were your own.
I was
choosing.
like the Waco of the agency. I was ready to go anywhere.
I'm going to now
And,
go through them one by one with your permission. They don't have to be in chronological order.
Doesn't matter.
I think, the story is in a way shaping itself. You allowed me to bring up your experience going to the occupied Palestinian territories, and you witnessed up front, and I hope I remember this correctly, that there aren't any Palestinian photojournalists being celebrated, and you actually create an umbrella group.
Yeah, that was my first assignment with AFP.
Which year was that?
I was 89.
89.
After the first Intifada.
So you're there during the uprising.
Yeah, after the first Intifada, first I had nothing left here because the reason why I left Lebanon in 89, there were like two reasons. First is that I did not realize that the only interest of Lebanon in the foreign media were the hostages. And that's where we kept working like crazy, and we were making money because we were on daily assignments waiting for hostages, Western hostages, to be released. And when all the hostages were released, then there came another level in the violence where Christians started killing each other. And it was 88, 89. And that did not fit in the checklist of the international media. So where do you put where today again, like there is like you can write everything anywhere, but like in the international page, where would you fit like Christians killing each others for nobody knew.
It's hard to make Jaja on sexy and
whatever
international.
It was Habaya Jaja on Jaja. Like
that's a very Lebanese
thing, and explain Lebanon to your audience. Like, who can explain Lebanon to you?
You can.
No, because
no, you can. I've heard you explain.
Lebanon. There's this famous joke who says like, if someone's tell you I will explain Lebanon to you, it means you didn't understand anything. So there's nothing to explain. Believe me, it's like anyway. So when I left, I was looking for a job, and AFP said we're looking for someone to build a network of Palestinian photojournalists. And me, as a Lebanese, I was like, seriously? And for them, I was like a French Arabic speaking guy. I was not a Lebanese.
Right. Yeah.
And everybody said, you're crazy. It's like the headline news. It's the major story in the world. It's Intifada. And yes, I went there and I built a generation of Palestinian photojournalists because, you should go back to history and to photography and photojournalism in the region. Photojournalism in Palestine did not exist after 67 because there were 2 or 3 photojournalists at that time that fled.
When you say it didn't exist, does that mean that they were not working for AFP, for example?
No,
that they were...
no. You're talking about population that is more and more, but it was like totally surrounded culturally, and that didn't have any reference but the occupier. That was their only reference.
So it was just...
They wouldn't speak English, they would speak Hebrew. They wouldn't speak any other language, but the only media they would read were their, 2 Palestinian papers and Hebrew. And they were all, again, that was very interesting, is that they would all speak Hebrew because they all went to Israeli prison. That was their school.
So
they were all jailed.
Just to clarify, so there are plenty of international photojournalists,
yes,
but the Palestinian photojournalists are working for...
There were no Palestinian photojournalists. There were photographers in Palestine that would work as tourist photographers. There were like commercial photographers.
Yeah.
There were the Armenian photographers who were like studio photographers, but there was nothing called photojournalist or people who would go and cover what was going on in the news approach. Okay, there were a lot of journalists, Palestinian journalists, but nothing,
Not covering conflict.
no
the way-
photojournalists.
Yeah.
You know, like, and when I went there to hire people and say, come on, guys, I mean, we need photojournalists. I mean, the Israelis were covering and they stopped covering the Intifada. And anyway, AFP at that time didn't want Israelis to go and cover the Intifada, and they didn't want to do it anyway. So we had to create a base of Palestinian photojournalists. So it took me like sometimes to try to understand what was going on there and where I could find Palestinian photojournalists. So, and I bumped into two kids. They were like in their early 20s, and they were just they have been released from jail, from Israeli jail, because all of them went to jail. You know, it was the first Intifada, so they were like rounding them up, like you know, by hundreds. Still today, but I mean, at that time, and we borrowed them cameras with like a fixed lens, try to understand, and it took me like a year to explain to what photojournalism is, what photography is, what a lens is, what. And look at them now. I mean, like they grew up like babies. Everywhere you have.
So you're actually training what would later become a given that there are Palestinian.
Yeah, I did the same. I did the same in. In Iraq after. I did the same in Syria. I did. I mean, it was like a kind of task for me because later at AFP I built the region, the MENA region, in photography.
Yeah.
And I started like building networks of photographers in conflict zone, unfortunately, because that was what we didn't need photojournalists. They were there. I mean, Dubai, you find photojournalists everywhere. You know, Saudi, you'd find photographers there, but in like specific areas like Iraq, Libya, Syria, Yemen, we were looking for photojournalists, and the advantage we had for a specific number of years, because we started it, is that we were Arabic-speaking people.
Yeah.
And when we approach photographers or so-called photographers, and we need to train them, we had to train them in their own language. And understand their culture. And
I'll circle back at the end to what's happening now in Gaza, because I'd like your photojournalist lens in terms of how people perceive the conflict today from people on the ground. I'll save that to the end. Just to cherry pick a bit, because it's such a long and rich career, just a bit about these other experiences you went through in different countries that most Lebanese, I don't think, have a direct relationship to, and that includes Bosnia. We've seen it on the news. Most of us don't know what Sarajevo looks like, except for CNN in those years, watching it on TV. You're there on the ground. So anything you can bring back to life about covering conflicts that are not maybe familiar, because I can imagine you in Ain al-Mene or whatever in Beirut. I mean, look, you're taking people to the airport because your dad's office is there. Bosnia, you don't have that kind of
and
intimacy.
I didn't have I didn't last long in Sarajevo. First I went by road.
From here?
No, from Paris.
Okay.
I had to drive the first bulletproof car of AFP, and who's the only, you know, who would drive this car from Paris to Sarajevo without knowing the road. I mean, we're not talking about GPS or something, no. And I went with a colleague of mine, and they said, "You're the only one who's willing to do it." I said, "Yeah, let's go." And my aim was to compare Sarajevo with Beirut.
So you
because
chose
that was my
mission.
first conflict after I left Beirut. It was 93.
Well, you were in Gaza.
But that was not a conflict. When I'm saying, like, we're talking about conflict, like bombing, snipers. That wasn't the case in Palestine. You know, Palestine was rioting, and you know.
So this was the first time you
It was like the first time I was entering a city that was surrounded by all part
Yeah.
who being bombed and snipers and and it was a mousetrap. I realized that, I used to say, well, during the war in Lebanon, you used to pull from the city or from any area that is hot and then go and dance on the table somewhere else, right? Or ski in Faraya while Beirut is burning. So in Sarajevo, no. It was like a city that was surrounded by the Serbs. We were UN accredited as media,
Yeah.
and we could go in and out to get food and petrol for our own use. But I was like, I bumped into people who look like me, to listen the same music as me, and at the contrary to what I lived here, where I used to go out and to Zunye or because, it was safe and have fun, they couldn't go anywhere. They had the same parties we used to have, but in shelters, underground. And I got close to, because it was my generation. It was like all were like in their 27, 26, 27, 28. So instead of me started taking pictures, I dropped the flak jacket, I dropped the helmet, because walking in the street looking like an alien while people were just lining up for bread and being sniped and me like trying to take pictures. And I started like going to the Serb villages, buy food, buy gas, started distributing food and gas. And I said to myself, you better leave because that's not your job.
Sorry, so you became literally just somebody experiencing.
I was a relief organization.
Yeah, yeah.
I turned myself into a relief organization, and I hated it. Also, I hated the place because it was minus 14, minus 15. It was in the middle of winter.
Yeah.
I didn't have windows. It was the Holiday Inn, the infamous Holiday Inn. I didn't have windows. I had plastic replacing the windows. I couldn't process the films because it needed to be at a specific temperature, and you were wearing gloves, and you couldn't warm the correct temperature for the chemicals because the generator didn't have enough power for the heater. Anyway, it was like a whole and people were lining up because they knew that we had an Inmarsat dish where we could use the phone, so they wanted to call their relatives who were abroad, and you couldn't say no. It was like a whole mix of relief organization and a news organization that I didn't manage to handle properly. And I had colleagues who were getting shots every day, and colleagues who lost their mind. And there was this avenue called Sniper Alley, where we had to drive through to go to the next Serb village, the first Serb village where we could get food. And so it was like, for me, it wasn't. It was a nice experience, and I didn't want to mix both. And I felt like when I left the place, I felt like I betrayed them because I did not stay, And it reminded me of the media that I used to bump into in Lebanon that used to come, do their show, and leave.
Yeah. They still do.
They still do, but I mean, during the conflict, they used to come and leave.
Yeah.
Like show their face, like behind me, Beirut is burning. Well, get the fuck out. We need to see Beirut, not your face.
I've experienced this myself.
Exactly.
They actually pushed you out of the way on their way out. Yeah.
So it's really like it's very difficult to manage, and that was really my first experience with like another war.
You mentioned that you saw yourself and other people there, and you even take off your protective gear to, in a way, you're becoming one of them, even though it's not your conflict. I've been to Sarajevo several times, and I always feel like I am there too. It's a different version of me.
Yeah.
And you know, it's funny when you mentioned the Holiday Inn. They know about our Holiday Inn.
Yeah.
And they're always, what happened to it? No, ours is still the way it was. They repaired theirs. But there is familiarity in experiencing conflict, and I fully agree. I actually felt that there, minus the escape route. I never thought of it this way. There is no escape there. You're in a valley.
There was no escape route at all.
Yeah, you're literally you had access with the UN, but physically Sarajevo is at the bottom of a mountain range. You're going to be stuck there.
And you arrived the day I arrived to Sarajevo. I mean, it's impressive because you're just like, I will never forget it. Like there's a tiny road that leads you to a bridge, and you see like you're entering the city, and then you turn on the bridge, and then to reach the infamous Sniper Alley, and on the left there is a huge graffiti saying "Welcome to Hell."
Yeah.
And you're like, and you see this graffiti every time you go in and out.
That's true.
And I didn't last long, believe me. I was like, I told AFP, "Khalas, take me out from here," because.
So you actually you remove yourself in a way from something that I think is what you're seeking, which is conflict and career.
Yeah.
But you do go to other conflict zones, and I want to touch on these briefly. You go to Kurdistan, northern Iraq, in 1998. You go to Afghanistan years later. You're in Libya too, during the uprising in Libya and chaos. So you're still pursuing conflict. I know from hearing you in different outlets, Libya is a turning point. But before Libya, this draw to conflict, I think, has, whether it's intentional or not, it brought me closer to stories that I didn't know enough about as a younger person, thanks to your work. And long ago, I saw a photo of yours. I didn't know it was yours at the time. It's a photo from the Palestine Hotel. And I think it's 2003, the photo is taken. I'm going to I'll include it in the episode. And I'd like to explore this book a bit with you because it's a great book. Don't Take My Picture, Iraqis Don't Cry. Thankfully, you gave me a copy. It is page 26. I know this photo, and I didn't know it was yours. Now, this is a photo of, I think, a colleague of yours' camera in the Palestine Hotel. It's he loses his leg, or there's a shell.
He didn't. No, he didn't. This one survived. He didn't with light injuries, but he stopped working as a photographer.
But
that was a camera that belongs to a cameraman, to a photographer from Reuters.
Right, and you're being bombed by the American army.
Yeah, and we didn't know what was going on at the beginning.
Yeah,
it was like I was sitting.
I'll actually let you
I was sitting transmitting photos.
Bring it back at the end, please.
In Hotel Palestine.
Yeah.
And then I heard a boom, a blast, and I took my camera, went out from the room. I mean, like a few minutes after, because I wanted to finish, editing and sending. It took me like a few minutes, and write the caption. And I took the camera and went out. And I saw this camera covered with blood on the floor. That was the elevator lobby. I took a photo, and because I saw it, I saw like the carpet. You think like a photographer, and then I heard we need a doctor and people screaming, and so I went back, grabbed my first aid kit. Went to Reuters' office that was at the end of the corridor, and you don't really understand what's going on. There were like people screaming, and there was like, remember he was Ukrainian or something, I don't know, but I mean he was lying on the bed, and I looked at him and I started like processing and remembering what are the first aid you should give. And and it's easy when you're like in a Red Cross training or in a workshop or whatever, but when you're facing reality, it has nothing to do with the and I didn't see any blood. There was like a black hole in his leg. It was burned, you know. So anyway, don't think. And I remember a colleague of mine just like gave me a tap and then said like, grab the bed sheet and let's carry him now. And we grabbed the bed sheet and he's like on the bed sheet. We were four of us like carrying him down. We walk in the elevator, press ground floor. I will never forget this. It was like a mirror scene. It stops on the floor, like before, underneath, and the door of the elevator opens, and you have 4 people, exactly the same scene, carrying someone in a bed sheet.
Wow.
We were like, what's going on? We didn't understand what was going on. We went down the lobby, and then we saw like there is a pickup full of blood, etc. Anyway, so it was like, indeed, it was a U.S. Army tank that was crossing the bridge, entering Baghdad, and they fired at 2 balconies where you had 2 crews. One was Reuters crew, and the other one was Spanish TV crew. And they had like killed 3 journalists, and so what's the excuse after, etc. I'm not going to get there, but they just killed three journalists and injured 5 people, mainly from Reuters.
The reason that photo stuck with me, and I didn't know it was yours back then, was that I'm watching a photojournalist take the photo of what could be a lost life. You're not clear. It's not clear until the story comes out later. There's someone's blood draped on a expensive camera. And the thought goes through my mind, at least, that this is a real reminder of the risk your job entails. That you're facing death right in front of you. And it's very violent and it's exposed. Also, the care and attention you're giving to take the photo, which is real. You're actually taking a great shot of someone getting shot in their leg. So there's one aspect there. The other aspect that comes to mind is another photo you took, and I believe it's in this book as well. It's the famous, well, there is a famous image of the American flag being draped on Saddam Hussein as he's being pulled down. You're taking another photo of a statue being taken down by Iraqis.
But not on purpose.
Not on purpose. It just happens to be nearby, and they're desecrating his statue, but you're there. And to me, that also signals something else. You're not there for what we now call clickbait or entertainment value. You're there to share a story, and you're sharing a more Iraqi story at that moment.
Exactly.
So I'm getting that right. Are you driven by that too? In other words, you're seeking other people's pain to make sure their pain is exposed. And I don't want to sound like a therapist here.
Yes and no. Let me say that I show what I see. And that's what my eyes see.
But you're making a careful decision to show other people's moments when all other lenses are focused in a different direction.
Yeah. I was teaching like the day before yesterday. I was telling students, I said, you put 2 photographers elbow to elbow.
Sorry?
You put 2 photographers elbow to elbow.
Yeah.
You will barely get the same photo. It's all about your eye. It's not about the camera. It's not about you. It's what you see. It's also, I believe it's part of your culture, your background, your history, and what you want to show. But what you want to show comes like automatically. It's your brain processes it automatically. It's the first thing you see is the light, how you frame, and where the picture is. But again, that's related for me. I believe so. Related to your history, your culture, who you work for, what's what you want to show. That's like,
Is there something there about what you're relating to yourself in maybe Lebanon is how you see other conflicts too?
of course. I mean, when Lebanon helped me a lot, really a lot. I mean, my experience in Lebanon as a kid who grew up on the demarcation line and chased snipers, and it helped me like survive in many places.
Right. Yeah.
And I remember in Iraq, I avoided being shot, and it's a U.S. Army officer who got shot because I saw things that those kids coming out from West Point or wherever, brand new on a war zone or a battlefield, could not see. And I remember when I was in Ramadi, and the first time we walked into this building that was a disaffected hotel occupied by the U.S. Army, and they covered the staircase windows with like bed sheets and cover, etc., to avoid being seen from by snipers. And we entered the hotel, and there were like the stairs. We got the first floor, and then when we reached the second floor, I saw that one of the bed sheets were moved by the wind, and they could see us from the other side.
Yeah.
So I stepped aside. It took like a fraction of a second.
Wow.
Boom. The officer standing next to me got hit in the leg. So it's really like, you know,
I can see
I
that,
have
and
I can say that I have more war and conflict experience than many soldiers or people who go to war. I've been doing this for 30 years, more than 30 years.
Yeah.
And they arrived there. I mean, many of them haven't seen war in their life, or they've seen one, or, you know, they serve 6 months and they go back home. So it's really the way your brain processes things.
You know, there's more to cover. I want to just mention this book, wherever it is. If it's in the back, just bring it back to the front, please. I can't lose my copy tonight, wherever it is.
I'll get you another one.
Yeah,
There are very few left. There are very few left.
Yeah, no one takes this out of Aaliya's, please. This book, I'm lucky because I've heard you mention this in an interview now, maybe, I don't know, this could be 15 years ago. I did my research. That's not the initial title for the book. The title for the book is For Your Daughter.
Where did you find it?
I do my research, Patrick. This is why I've been doing it. Because I'm a big fan of yours anyway. So I would have...
Yeah.
I found one interview where maybe you say it, maybe you're not meant to say it, but it just comes out, that it's meant to be a title for your daughter. And your daughter is telling you, Dad, don't go to Iraq. I don't want you to die. And
You get killed.
I don't want you to get killed. And you're comforting her in a way, but you know deep down that her fear is real. So there's a title that gets taken away from you maybe for publishing reasons, and I hate whenever titles are changed for commercial reasons. It's happened to me before. I don't like titles changing.
Yeah.
And I like it when I know the original title. So that's your kid daughter. She's 9 or 10 at the time. I remember this right, yes. And she's telling you don't go, but you go. And then you deliver a fantastic book. And also your photos are among the best photos I've seen of a war in Iraq. So that kind of dance, it's your own daughter. This is it's not a student like Christina. This is your flesh and blood who's telling you don't go. You insist on going, and it's in you already. Fast forward a decade later, you're breaking down in Libya. I'd like to go down that road a bit with you. What happens in Libya that's different than any other experience? My guess is no one is telling you don't go to Libya. You go to Libya and it's just another assignment for you. What happens there?
Well, it's a totally different approach of coverage in news organization. For decades, I was by myself, going anywhere I want, doing whatever I want. No phone, no reporting. Just at the end of the day, you develop your photos and you send them, and nobody asks you where you are, what you're doing, and
Even within AFP, you're still on.
everyone. Yeah, I'm with AFP, and then the approach in covering news started changing a little bit. So you have to take with you a journalist, then you have to take a videographer, then there is when you're three, it's already when you're two, it's already okay. When you're three, it's already a bit too much. And then you have a driver, and then you have a translator because the people with you do not speak Arabic. You don't have the time to translate because you're shooting. So it's like imagine 5 people. And since I was the senior, so I was in charge of taking the decisions in there.
So their lives, in a way, depend on your decisions.
Exactly, which something that never happened to me.
Yeah.
You know, I was responsible of my own life. I was taking my own risks. I was like, fine with me. Okay, in Baghdad we were like 12 people, I remember, but it was different because like people were going with their own business. We were not like sitting whole team in a car going to, you know, and I wasn't sitting there, but I was like with another colleague. I would go out with a journalist. There were no videos at that time for AFP, so I would just go with another colleague and then sneak, and I'll tell you about sneaking in Fallujah later. So I was taking my own risk. It was not the case anymore. I was in charge of people with me, and it was in Ashdabia, west of Benghazi, and we bumped into a column of rebels, kind of Mad Max type, you know. I mean, you've seen the footage. They were in flip-flops with, you know, guns, and even one of them was holding an RPG rocket, like, you know, like throwing it like an arrow, you know, and daggers, and, you know, where are they going, you know? So it was like a huge column of these guys, and then we hear like fighter jets and French, because they were the only ones flying and bombing Libya. And I told the guys, I said, let's pull out, because there's no friendly identification. They could bomb us at any time. They can't make any difference between this convoy and the Libyan government.
And sorry, you're following a certain group at this
No,
time?
no, we just bumped into them.
You just randomly
We
bumped, I
just
see.
run into the rebels, and then so one of the bearded guy, you know, like Islamic type, came and say like, "Where are you going?" I said, "Look, there are fighter jets, and so they don't know who you are. They might bomb you. I mean, we better like." He looks at me and he says, "But you're French." I said, "Yes." He said, "You have a Suraya?" I said, "I have Suraya, you know, the satellite phone." He said, "Call them. Tell them we're here." I said, "Call who?" He said, like, "Hi, Paul." We're like, anyway, so just to tell you, like, what type of, you know, the way they think, the way they have no clue. And one of them just came out from nowhere and said they bumped the Libyan the Libyan government troops. We didn't hear anything, but they went bananas, and they started like screaming Allahu Akbar, and then they lined up their trucks, and we were like behind the dune, right? Mad Max.
Yeah.
We were behind the dune. They lined up the trucks, and they decided that they're gonna assault the town because the French have bombed it. Although we did not hear any bombing, but doesn't matter. So they took the curve behind the dune, and they launched their cavalry attack, like Mad Max, pure, exactly like in the movie. And stupidly, we followed.
Oh.
Okay, I don't know why we took the decision to follow. What blinded us in that specific moment to take that decision and follow this assault, stupid assault. And okay, when you follow, you're in the third, fourth row, whatever. And what was in front? Like T-72 Soviet-made tanks, Russian-made. It was like even Russian-made tanks waiting. And I started firing. And luckily, we were in the desert, and the shells were like hitting the sand. And of course, you had like trucks being blown away, and so what do? I'm in charge of like 3 people sitting in the back. Me, the driver, asked the driver to make a U-turn. Driver in total panic, so I had to sitting next to the driver, take the wheel, and at the same time, I realized everything later, but I started like telling the videographer, like, shoot, film, you have to film this. And because I couldn't take pictures, and I was like holding the wheel of the driver was in total panic, and I said, drive straight, we're in the desert, don't worry. They're firing at other targets, and I realized that next to me, like, I could take photos. So, like, in one hand I was shooting,
Yeah.
and on the other hand I was holding the. Anyway, we reached the curve again, hid behind the dune, and it took like a few weeks after before it started hitting me. Like, I put people's lives in danger.
So that was a moment for you that you're responsible, and that they could have died, but
Because of me.
because of you.
Yeah.
Is that you mentioned military service. You're kind of like a soldier for 30 years. I don't know if it's the right term, but is that almost like PTSD moment?
No, the PTSD came in 2013, 14, when 2013. But that was like another layer of burnout.
So it's post Libya.
Post Libya, this started like, being.
Yeah. But it's that moment that is.
Always, like, it's like your brain is a big garbage bin. If you don't empty it,
Yeah.
it stops functioning. So,
Yeah, that's interesting.
one event after the other, and then I had to deal with Syria. I trained like a dozen photographer in Turkey, Syrian guys, and
but Libya stays with you.
Yeah, Libya stayed with me, and then I started losing them one after the other, and some of them were like calling in the middle of the night. I couldn't sleep because they wanted like kind of talk to someone, and they had Skype, that they had internet in the middle of the night, so they could call. Anyway, so it's like a burnout that triggered finally the PTSD in 2013 when I was supposed to go to Gaza, and it's the first time I realized that it was a no. I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything. So it's, and I remember I still have the email where I sent the email to the team in Gaza saying, I'm sorry guys, but I won't make it this time. And I was always making it a point to be with my team in every conflict, especially in this region, because I experienced what it is to cover war in your own country. And that's the most terrible thing you could experience, because you don't know if you're going back home and take photos of your relatives, family, whatever, being bombed. You don't know if you're going to go back home alive. You don't know. So imagine what's going on in Gaza, and Gaza is going on like this for like decades already. We're not so.
I'm going to try to make a link here and, in a way, wrap it up with what's happening today in Gaza. You mentioned the videographer with you in Libya and the Arab Spring, which is, in a way, moving parallel to the rapid dependency on social media. And they're happening in tandem. And there's this digital requirement that maybe is unusual for a wartime photographer, that in a way your career was shaped largely by your own camera lens. Now you have, I think, more social media friendly content that's coming out. Is there any link from that, the way you see photojournalism changing on the ground, to what we do now? The photojournalists that I think of today, and maybe that's not the right name, maybe they're not photojournalists, are social media savvy storytellers, sharing clips, sharing photos sometimes, but it's mostly what's designed for social media. The name Motaz comes up all the time. I don't know if he's a photojournalist. I don't know if he's how you would describe a photojournalist, but it seems to me that's where the attention is today.
Well, I guess the world is evolving. What's media today? I would say that more than 90% of what we call, I don't know how they call them, the new generation after Gen Z, they don't know what a newspaper is or a media outlet is.
What are they called? Gen,
I don't know what.
I don't know.
Gen, they know nothing. But
that will be quoted to you.
I don't know if they know what the media outlet is.
Right.
You know? So in social media, there's media. So is there, and as in photojournalism, there is journalism, but what is media and what is journalism today? Is even the media, like the international media, or what's being known as the biggest media or in the world, or are using social media, and they're using the footage of those kids that we're talking about. The kids we're talking about, they are documenting their own life, their daily life. Right? I mean, it's exactly like you would tell me if Anne Frank was a journalist. Right?
Yeah.
There were no social media when Anne Frank wrote her diaries, right? They are documenting their diaries. This is their diaries, in fact. They're documenting their daily life. Call them whatever you want. But we're in the 21st century. We can't compare what we were doing at what they're doing today. They're wearing flak jackets with press on it. Fine. Are there press? Who define what journalism is today? Since, as I told you, the main media outlets are using their footage. What I consider is, where do they come from? They come from a school before social media. I mean, at the beginning of social media, when some of my colleagues used to call them citizen journalists. Doesn't mean anything. You know, if I give you a Band-Aid, if you're injured, doesn't make me a citizen doctor. You know, what does it mean, citizen journalist? It means nothing. It's just a media, word that I would put in there to define someone. They're a source.
They're a source.
When I started, we used to call them a source. They didn't have a smartphone. They had a phone. You would call someone and say, "What did you see?" They would repeat what they see, and you would write your story. Were they citizen journalists? No, they were a witness, and they were a source. Today, they call them citizen. Well, they don't call them anymore citizen journalists. Now they call them journalists. So it's pure documentation of the journalist work. Journalism work starts when you check the facts. Is this like a place? Is this the real place where it happened? You need facts.
I'll try. I mean, I'm not trying to. I'll say this carefully. I'm not defending or criticizing. A conflict photographer today Is Motaz something like that, or in your mind, he's just a conflict source?
Yes, he's a photographer.
He-
Motaz is a photographer. Like everything you've seen from Gaza is not only Motaz, but it's like different. Motaz became a GQ celebrity, but that's media frenzy again. Like they need to,
I see,
they need content to
Yeah.
attract readers and audience. And but yeah, I mean, social media is media today. I mean, everything you see on social media is media. The work of a journalist is check, do the fact checking. Is this like is this Jabalia or it's Rafah? What this guy is saying, is it correct?
Yeah.
Yes or no? This is the job. This is your job today. And some of them that are on social media are working also for international organization.
Yeah.
Doesn't make them like, they are journalists. So I don't see any difference. It's just the world is evolving. And believe me, and I'm sorry, I'm interrupting, but I am convinced, and some of my colleagues will hate me for this, but I am convinced 100%, like in few decades, there will be no more humans on the ground. You will have someone sitting in, let's say, in Tel Aviv with a robot in Gaza and making photos of what's going on in Gaza. We're doing it at the Olympics. You have robots under the pool, taking photos under the pool, where you have someone sitting and clicking on the button and making the robots move. You have drones. Why you won't have, at the end of the day, like a robot?
I remember you once mentioning it to me, and it was almost like it's anecdotal, but it could happen.
It could
That
happen.
The Lebanese,
It will. I'm sure it will.
Lebanese-Israeli border, you'll have drones taking photos of drones.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's literally just artificial intelligence.
It will happen if it's available on the market, right?
Yeah.
It's just a question of culture, getting used to it. Okay, we have journalists today,
Yeah.
Colleagues flying drones, right? They just fly drones.
Yeah.
They take pictures with drones.
When I see you with a
So
drone,
why it can't be on the ground?
I'll be disappointed if I ever see you.
But that's. Can we stop it?
Thankfully, you did a week-long series on different discussions also covering artificial intelligence. I'm not qualified for that subject, but it's definitely changing not just photography, but everything we do.
Everything we do.
So it's good that you brought it up this year. I'd like to wrap up the discussion with one more talking point, and wherever the book is, if we could just bring it back to the front, I would appreciate it. Yes, thank you. There's one other topic that I think it goes unnoticed, and maybe that's because it's not so conflict dependent, and maybe it comes at a time that you're healing yourself. It's a book that I find to be a treasure trove, and I think more people should know about this book. It's simply titled The Christians of Lebanon.
Yeah, but that's.
And
No,
I know you're
people-
not trying to promote one religion versus another.
And I'm not religious at all.
Yeah.
Like the contrary.
One would think from the book you are, but no. But the book, the reason I liked it, and there's actually one photo in particular. So this is, it's capturing. I don't know if you feel the same way, but it's capturing a community's insecurities on display.
Exactly.
I think that's a fair assessment. A lot of it's iconography, and it's also just community as they express themselves more recently than before. But there's one picture that I really love because it's a photo that I've been trying to take my whole life, and I never get it right.
I'm worried. What you're gonna pick?
I hope yes, it's here. So this is a place I've been going to since I was a kid. It's a place
This is a postcard.
It's
As
not
I see.
just a postcard. You found a way to make Psharri really stand out. And it's the angle no one looks at. Everyone tries to catch this little sleepy village the wrong side. You caught the right side.
I don't.
Let me engage your work for a second. You're capturing layers of history. You're capturing it in winter, but not where it's blanked out. You're also capturing no one in the village, which is important.
It was freezing.
Well, It usually is in the winter. I think it takes a talented photographer to make Bsharri sad, not necessarily happy. And you found a way, I found something in this town, the way you show it, to be a community that's on the retreat. That's the way I saw it. It's melting.
That's your interpretation.
Yeah.
That's what photography is about.
And that's why I love this book. It's because
Well, Aline will be happy. She's the how would I put it? The photo editor, the one who picked who chose the photos, and she's inside in the.
So, as somebody who's neither Christian nor searching for religion to guide me in any direction, I found the natural displays of the way Lebanon looks today very appealing.
Thank you.
This is
Merci,
why
Aline.
every episode I record at home, there's this book, and people question me sometimes, like, "Why is this there?" I'm like, "No. Look
I have a friend, but she left. She's like, "Why did you do that?" I said, because I mean, that's what documentation is about, and but she prefers that one. So
you know what? I think both serve a function, and the truth is, you said it already. You are a photographer. Conflict maybe is a drug. War is a drug, but you're a photographer. And
I found out that I was a photographer much later, very recently, I would say.
I hope you do more of these, not through drone, but through your lens, because it's a treasure trove.
Thank you.
Now, there will be other subjects we can discuss during the Q&A. Sure. I want to say something. There's that old saying. I used to not really appreciate it, that a picture is worth 1,000 words. That's the saying.
I don't agree. I think a word is more dangerous than 1,000 picture, can be more dangerous than 1,000 picture. And we were discussing it yesterday, and with AI and prompt photography today, the word you use to prompt a photograph can be 10 times more dangerous than by like prompting this photograph. Like the word you use are very dangerous. So yes, I mean photography. It's again a media thing. Like a photo is worth 1,000 words. A word is worth 1,000 photo. You have words, you have photos. They both can provoke damage. They both can do damage, and both can be very nice. So I don't get into this. I don't like this comparison with words. And this book is full of words. It has photographs. It's full of words. This book has no words. It's full of photographs. So it's really the way you want to look at it and the way you want to express yourself. And I truly believe that. I mean, I learned. I was not a. I think I picked the way to express myself visually because I was not very good at writing. I was very bad at school. And I come from a generation where you had to be a doctor, a lawyer, an architect. That was like the 5 jobs that were available and nothing else. Otherwise, you're nothing. And they were not teaching you art at school because you had to write. Newspapers had very few photos. Or Arabic books, Adab al-Arabi, like 3 kilos with not a single photo in it. So photography was like something that was very like limited to the Armenian community because they were the essence of photography in the region. That's another subject, but yes, I think we can express ourselves in many different ways. And I have friends here who are very like great artists who are expressing themselves through prompt photography. It's a way of expression too.
In my own life, someone who depends on expression for a living, in its beauty and in its pain, Lebanon is better with your work and yourself in it.
Thank you very much.
That's my way of thanking you for joining.
Thank you for.
We'll take a 15-minute break and then we'll open it to Q&A. You can ask anything to Patrick. Thank you, Patrick Baz.
Thank you, dear. Thank you very much.
So guys, Rayan has the mic. He'll be passing it around. And if anyone has a question up front, please feel free. And Patrick gave us permission to be very personal, extremely personal.
No, don't be afraid. Don't be shy.
Don't
Hit
be
me.
shy. The man posts erotic photos on Instagram and gets banned all the time. I love when they live for 5 seconds. And then I'm like, oh, that's what she looks like.
That's when I'm happy to beat the algorithm.
That's right. Yeah, but you're very dangerous.
5 seconds.
5 seconds. He's good at erotica. It just gets banned. So, are there any questions up front? The lady in the front.
Hi. Okay. So first of all, thanks for this moment. I'm myself like a baby photographer, so it's really interesting for me. So I think all of us, when we wake up, we see a lot of horrible images like dead babies, burned people in Gaza. And a lot of these pictures are not taken by journalists, but by civilians. But I'm wondering, is it the role of the photojournalist to shock people? Is it useful to shock people with those type of pictures? And is it the only way to inform about the war zone?
I will answer you. Your question is like goes back to the history of photojournalism. And before Instagram algorithm, there was what we used to call the morning breakfast front page. There was a kind of censorship. I wouldn't call it censorship, but like a filter in the major American newspapers like the New York Times, the Washington Post, etc., that they didn't want to publish on their front pages gory images because there will be kind of a reaction of the reader at breakfast in the morning, and the reader wouldn't buy the paper anymore. And when we used to shoot, we had two different approaches. One for the front page that we hope we'll have the front page of the New York Times with like clean, not gory images, or, that it's a different angle that you take, and the same place with what really happened. Is it like you're going to, are we censoring ourselves? No. As I told you before, you're showing what your eye wants to see. And you have photographers who will show you gory stuff, and you have photographers who will show you the same event that will move you in a different way. It all depends on the audience, it all depends on your culture, it all depends on how you look at the photo. And the Arab world is since there is no visual culture in the Arab world, you will see more gory images coming out from either Arab photographers or in the Arab media. And I remember that when we used to cover the Lebanese war, and we used to look at the local papers, with the pictures they would publish were like horrific. There was not a single information. They would just like publish a photo of shared bodies, and like pieces of arms and legs, and say, where is the information in this? This is what happened. No, this is not what happened. This is like, we try as much as we can to put the 5 W's in one image. We used to. It's not the case today. It's like when, where, what, who, and why. If we manage to put it in one photo, but as much as we could, that would be like great. But yeah, I mean, today you see, you could have a warning on Instagram, like sensitive image. Okay, why do you show me this? I mean, should I have to click, or what's the purpose of this filter? And when you publish nude art, I'm not talking about porn, they censor you. So what's better, like So it's all about your culture. I mean, I'm sure that if we had like a French Instagram, we'd be very happy to publish like whatever we feel like publishing. It's like we would be more open to the to art and stuff and nudity than the American, but we're dominated by American culture. So
5 seconds, and then it gets blocked every time. Are there other questions? The lady in the back. Is that Katerina? Katerina, hi.
Hello, good evening, and thank you so much for this opportunity to share your experiences with us. As you were telling about what happened in Iraq, in Hotel Palestine, I couldn't help thinking about those photojournalists and journalists who actually didn't make it, actually. And I remembered the case of Remy Oschlik and Mary Colvin, who were killed in Homs in 2012. Or I don't know if you knew him, Basil Shade, a journalist and filmmaker who was killed in Homs also in 2012. And Issam Abdallah, who unfortunately was killed last year, covering the Blue Line conflict. And my question would be, given all the experience that a war zone journalist and a photojournalist might acquire over the years going to such assignments, isn't it at the end of the day just a stroke of luck whether one gets out safe and sound or not? Because it seems to me that sometimes it's really very much professionally experienced people who don't make it in the end for reasons of accrued fate, maybe. Thank you.
I'll tell you, there is luck, there is experience, and there is what I could call instinct. I don't know how to explain the instinct, but there are places where I simply felt like not going, despite like everything all the places I went through. But there is an instinct that tell you don't go there, you don't go. There is like, it happens. I had like this with in Sarajevo again. We were driving towards Tuzla. It's a village that was attacked by the Serbs, and I was with this colleague in this so-called bulletproof car, and he was driving, and I was sitting next to him, and we drove through like a burned village, and then we saw like a column of refugees, displaced people coming, and then they started screaming in Serbo-Croats, like puchka, what does it mean? Like fired. We understood that means people are firing. And there was a bus that like cut the road and was burning. And he said, "What do we do?" I said, "I don't know, you're the driver. I would suggest we go reverse, but since you're driving, you take the decision." He looked at me, he put reverse. We went back. We were like going back to Sarajevo. We saw the car of the BBC passing in the other direction what we were coming from. We arrived in Sarajevo and we learned that the guy was shot. So it's luck, it's instinct, and it's also when you're in a place where it is dangerous, and you know it's dangerous, either you risk the kidnapping or risk the being killed, or you don't last more than 20 minutes and then leave. You have this, what we call the 15-20 minute gap, where if someone wants to shoot at you or spotted you, he needs 15 minutes to go get his friends, or he's back, you're not there. It's like this is part of things you start building up in your surviving system. And I told you the story about the sniper that shot through the window, but that's my experience. if I did not grow up here, I would not probably have survived the 30 years that I've been through, because it's not about only this incident. I have like many, many incidents where I've seen things that was kind of déjà vu while I grew up here. And yeah, it's and kidnapping. Kidnapping is another story. Kidnapping. You don't go to Iraq or Afghanistan and you drive around or walk around dressed like a Westerner, or even, I mean, even my glasses in Baghdad were, I would say, Baghdad in the 70s, like everything that was available in the market. You wouldn't wear a watch that would spot the eye of someone. Your shirt should be local shirt. Grow a beard. Be a chameleon. You know, adapt or die. That's a rule. You can't like behave like an American contractor, drive a 4-wheel drive with tinted windows and dress like in 511 suits or no, just like be normal. You know, I was in Iraq when I sneaked in Fallujah during the first assault of Fallujah, and I was dressed in black. I had my the Muslim how do you call it, kalot, and my beard when I grew my beard when I was younger, it was red, so I really looked like Daeshi, and I had like prayer beads on my, you know, and Quranic verses, and I used my Arabic as much as I could, and well, I didn't take a single photo because I realized that I couldn't even take my camera out to take pictures. But the scene I've seen were like speeches, you know, those kids with like suicide belts, and they were like just in front of me, sitting in front of me, and I was like, Assalamu alaikum, wa alaikum assalam, wa rahmatullah, wa barakatuh. Well, but I couldn't take a single photo, and I knew that if I would like take the camera out, dead. So it's all about knowing how, you know, some colleagues were kidnapped. One colleague was kidnapped because he stopped the car in the triangle of death, we used to call the triangle of death, or the Bermuda Triangle. It was the Sunni villages triangle. He stopped the car, went out from the car, took his Suraya because he had to do a live report. You don't do that. You know, you say to your to the newsroom, no, I have to do the report. No, Habibi, don't do the report. And it's all about feeling what's going on around you, but that comes with experience. Believe me, it doesn't. And you have luck, of course. I mean, in Libya, we could have been killed by a tank shell. Luck, and I believe in the maktub. Otherwise, I don't think I would be sitting here with all the luck and the. I'm not a religious person. I'm not a believer, but I think that there are paths in life that you can take, and life offers you some exits. And I hope I answered your question.
I'll interject and force somebody to ask you a question. I'm going to shift from the more professional career to the personal. A neighbor of mine in my building, I hope she's still here, Mirna Jmail.
Wayna Mirna.
Mirna? Where is she?
She was here. She left?
She left? Oh, she's gone.
She gave me a hug and she left.
Ah, she's gone? She has some good stories about you that she told me in my parking garage. That's too bad she's gone. Okay.
It's good she refreshes my memory.
Alexi, Rayan, let's go to my apartment after. We're going to record her testimonials about childhood memories. Okay, it's too bad she's gone. There's someone else here. Someone that I think I am a fan of even when I don't necessarily see him that often. But whenever I run into him, it's a delight. Even when he's running away from me. That's George Azar. So I'd like George to ask you a question. For me, this is a unique opportunity. Photojournalists asking each other and talking to each other. Let's give the mic to George Azar.
The thing I'm curious about is you've been in this job for 30 years, have taken hundreds of thousands of images. Did you ever reach a point, and I'm sure you see frames everywhere as you go through the world. Have you ever reached a point of alienation with the photo?
What? Sorry.
Of alienation
Yes.
with photography? Have you ever reached a point where you lost that passion, where you were tired of it, where you...
No, I've
Oversaturated.
changed. I tell you what, through my therapy, after my PTSD, I totally changed my way of looking at things. I, of course, find out that there is life. You know, I mean, I was shooting death for years. Now I'm taking pictures of life, which is a totally different approach. And I start looking at things in a different way. Even if I see news in front of me, I don't really care. I don't look at images coming from Ukraine and Gaza anymore. I think I have an overdose of this. But I still know what's going on, of course. But there is something that is very interesting, is I see differently. I barely shoot, right? Because, I mean, I don't work every day. I do like corporate, and but when I do my things, if I don't see the light with the right picture, with the right, like, I feel like I'm going back to the negative, although with shooting, I shoot digital, but I'm going back to the way we should have taken photos with like the right light, one photo, one frame, like, you know, just like smooth, easy. I'm sure you understand what I mean, because we're like, and I see a photo and I see the light, you know, the right light, the correct light. This is where I shoot. Sometimes I stop the car, even with the phone. I have nothing against the phone. It's high resolution images. It's full of AI. You can fix the colors exactly like you're shooting with a normal camera. Okay, it depends on the phone you have. I mean, I have an old 11S, but the lens is the same. It's a camera lens. So, yes, I can take photos with my phone. It's the pleasure of taking photos, and not anymore the pleasure of being published, the pleasure of chasing the news. It's me and what's going on around me that I like to document, and sometimes I see that I don't take the photo. I just see this is a nice photo I don't take it. I mean, let's say I have nothing to prove anymore, right? It's like serenity. I'm like, I reached, okay, that's been there, done that. Just see something else.
I want to recommend an episode I did with George Azar. I guess it's less than a year ago. I'm not sure exactly when. George was sitting here sharing a familiar tale from his eyes. And I really appreciate you saying that elbow to elbow, two talented photojournalists would see different things. And I think really this difficult career is all the better with you still in Beirut. And I think you're pioneers in your own right. And I look up to you for my own storytelling craft, even when it's not through photos. I think you guys did it right. And the fact that I do see you taking a break, and I don't know if this is fair to say, when you're with Ammar Abdramo in France, taking photos that are not, it's not the same terrain, but I think that's a good sign too, that you're still behind the camera when you want to be, that you haven't alienated yourself entirely.
Yeah, I used to make fun of people who were taking pictures on the red carpet, and now I'm one of them. But
yeah, no, but they're good photos.
you know, it's It's just the way you do it and the way you you
You
document.
actually make me want to be there.
You document it, but yeah.
Are there other questions?
Give the mic to Aline. Let her
Where
hit
is
me
it?
with something. No?
The lady in the back. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank
I
you.
have a question about the issue of mental health and the impact of the work on the mental health of photojournalists. I have very limited but personal observations throughout the 80s and 90s, being the daughter of a war photographer myself, that the issue was widely known within the community, that there is a mental health impact of the issues that you're observing on a daily basis, a difficulty to adapt sometimes to regular life, but it's either not very well known but not talked about. And in the 90s and 80s, especially, because I don't know the following, but also a fear of not getting the next assignment if you request support. So my question is, did you observe any differences in the approach of agencies, but also the community of photojournalists to the issue? Thank you.
Yes. You know, the problem with PTSD is one of the problem you raised is that they're afraid that if they talk about it, that they won't be sent to another assignment. And PTSD is what we call the invisible wound. Someone with a scar or scratches walking in a newsroom is very sexy. It attracts help from colleagues, you know, who are like ready to help for everything. And when someone walks in a newsroom with social behavior and mental disturbances, and they say, he's not well, he's crazy, he's like, don't talk to him, or we don't know how to approach him, or we don't. And that's one of the issue. The other issue is that in this profession that is, I would say was, let's say, we're talking about war correspondent and photojournalists, war photographers, 90% male dominated. There is this macho approach, the image of the Indiana Jones, and it's exactly like in the military. You know, try to ask a special forces officer if he has PTSD. What are you talking about? You know, you're full of PTSD. Now it's getting better because there are more and more people like me who are opening up. And when I opened up, it's not because I wanted to talk about it publicly, but because the health department within AFP, I mean the doctor who's running the health department within AFP, told me that if I talk about it coming from me, it would be more accepted by people around me than if a young chap who just started would talk about it. So I said, I don't have an issue talking about it because, I mean, it is an injury. It's a wound that we have to cure somehow. And I think I was like the second one in the French media corp that talked about it. The first one was someone we were really making fun of. It's Jean-Pierre. Well, he wrote a book in French called The Invisible Wounds, Les Blessures Invisibles. And I remember before I had my PTSD, there was like this famous place in a village in Bayeux, in Normandy, called Le Prix des Correspondants de Guerre, like the war award where all the war correspondence community go to. And he had a talk, and he asked me to sit next to him. And I said, why? I have nothing to do sitting next to you. I don't have PTSD. No one has PTSD, blah, 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 you know, the whole thing. And then I apologized like many years after, saying, I'm sorry. You were you were right by writing this book. And Jean-Paul Marie is a Nouvel Observateur. He was ex-Nouvel Observateur. So, yes, it starts opening up. And if some of you are interested, I think RSF, Reporters Sans Frontières, opened an office here where they requested assistance from different kind of therapists to help journalists deal with that, because the problem that you're raising is one of the problem that is very, very important, is that freelancers. I was lucky. I work for AFP. As much as my colleague over there works for AFP, he was extremely lucky to be covered by AFP. When you work in an international news organization, you're covered. When you're a freelancer, you want to go get a therapy, man, it's like $70, $80 per hour. For someone who would tell you, yeah, tell me your story. So, I mean, like, I have to pay $80 for you to listen to my story. Well, then you have the EMDR, but the EMDR, I don't know if some of you guys know about the PTSD therapy, but it's like the eye motion thing that it takes like 3 sessions before you start your EMDR, and then your EMDR is like 3 other sessions, and well, for a freelancer, it's very difficult. I think that RSF are opening this office to deal with that. And again, if a freelancer talks to his, like, not employer, but whatever gives him a job, to say like, I can't go there now, I'm being treated for PTSD, he will never get a call again. So, as if you're like injured and you say, well, I fixed my leg, everything is fine, I can run. Okay, go back to Ukraine or wherever it is. So yes, that is a problem then.
Sorry, may I ask, who is your father?
She doesn't want to be recorded.
You don't want to? Okay.
I prefer not to, but a very similar story is a Turkish national who speaks several languages, who started his career with the New York Times in Vietnam, and then who covered most of the Middle East. So I do feel that I know some of the troubles. And thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
Do we have other questions?
Dylan, wake up.
Where's Dylan?
Shoot me.
Dylan's
Shoot me.
here. Dylan. No questions? Okay, well, we're lucky. We have someone from the great village of Recanati in Italy, the one and only Giulia Cingolani, who always has a fantastic question for every episode. So let's give the mic to Giulia.
Giulia
Cingolani.
Ronnie obliges me every time, okay?
Hello,
I will
Giulia.
sue you. Okay, so I wanted to ask kind of a follow-up question to the question that I asked last time during Christina Sassi's episode. So I was sitting actually next to you, and like what strikes me this time as well is, so Christina said, so encourage journalists not to do that again, you know, so not to put your life in risk. And you said the same this time. So why does this happen every time? So why do you keep on putting your life in risk? Is it like adrenaline? Is it more, I don't know, like the will of showing people something that is happening? Is it ethics? What pushes you to do that? Although...
Interesting. I always ask myself, I mean, I don't think I did it. I don't believe I ever did it. I never saw myself as the white knight who wants to free information over the world and show people what's going on, or no. That I don't think that pushes you to put your life at risk. I think there is something within you. In French, there is an expression that says, I never managed to translate this expression in English. It's la fuite en avant. It's like fleeing forward, you know, fleeing what? Or, you know, I mean, what takes you there? Well, and for me, I think it was like here, because I grew up here, and that's what, and became a drug. It became a drug in what sense? It's like you can't adapt to a normal life after a certain amount of conflict you lived in, because we're not, when you work with AFP, a newswire, and you're specialized in the MENA region, you live there. Like when you go to Baghdad, I mean, I spent like 5 years almost on and off in Iraq, Baghdad or elsewhere.
Believe it or not, it's still recording somehow. Yeah, it's still recording.
Ramadi, Fallujah, 5 years. And I kept going because I felt more comfortable living there than living in a normal place. And it becomes like in a chain reaction. Like, okay, you go to, why don't adapt to society? Well, you don't adapt to society because what? I'll be sitting there, let's say with you, and you in a bar, and what would I talk about? Like I stepped over dead bodies, or I got someone shot next to me, or what do you want me to tell you? Well, yes, you have, I'm sure we all have colleagues that will talk about, like be Indiana Jones, just, but depends on your character, depends on your personality. So, and then you have the addictions that you start like getting, because PTSD is also addiction. When you have PTSD, it creates addiction. Alcohol, drugs, sex, it's like you start like hanging on those addictions. Like a drug is kind of take you somewhere where you probably don't want to go, but it takes you there. Alcohol is like makes you forget everything. Sex is like you hang on life. This is what life is about. So, and it becomes like real addictions, and you can't get rid of them because it's you need them. So this is how your brain works, and you go back to what? War. Because there are no rules, right? You do whatever you want. No one's asking you anything. And it was much better when we used to cover Boer in the 80s, as I told you, because we were alone. There were no phones. We were living it like in our own way. Nobody was contact. Just like call. Did you get the picture? Yes. Khalas. There's nothing else. And so it is a drug. That's why I say it is a drug, because you go back to normality. We don't talk the same language. We don't live the same way. We're not.
Any other questions?
Khalas?
So let me wrap it up appropriately.
I'm not relieved yet?
Sorry?
I'm not relieved yet?
You're not relieved? No, you're relieved.
You're not releasing me?
Yeah, I am. I'll wrap it up in a nice way. This was 3 years in the making. I'm glad that for at least the next few months, you're the last live discussion I'll be having.
What an honor.
So why not end it with the best, right?
What's going on?
It was so bad, I can't do it anymore. No.
Where are you going?
I'm taking a few months away from live discussions for a few months.
Great.
But I'll be back later, and I've already determined from now I'll be doing hopefully my next live episode with the gentleman sitting behind Julia, Jad Khouri, right there. A quiet, humble artist, a man who's expressed himself through my childhood on Future TV. For those that remember those comics and those animations, at a time Future TV was pioneering in the late 90s, I was young. I used to watch this man on TV without knowing that I'd actually one day get to invite him on the podcast. So fingers crossed you're the next guest. That would be a highlight for me. I'll also say a few things. Anytime George Azar is in the room, or for that matter, Dylan, if he's still here. I don't know if he's still here. Maybe he left. There he is. Dylan, somebody I don't know well enough, but we communicate from time to time. This man's a photojournalist in his own right. You've survived Ukraine. You've survived, well, you were here last time with Christina. You were with Isam and Christina and others. You made it through. So anytime you're in the room, it's a treat for me too. Aline and all the other photojournalists that were here earlier.
The first female photojournalist in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Yep.
But you know, Aline, what you declined to do resonates with me. Aline is offered the mic. You don't want to talk. I sympathize with you. And the reason I sympathize, I think any artist, and I think you, in a way, you are an artist. Artists don't need to talk. Their work should stand on its own. And if you want to get to know Patrick, well, maybe. Well, now you're talking. But really, I mean this. If you want to know more about Dylan, George Hazard, or Patrick Baz, or anyone doing photojournalism, yourself included, Aline, check out their work. Their work stands tall.
Thank you.
I know these books are not easy to get. I'm glad I have copies. You can DM Patrick if you're nice to him. Maybe he'll give you a spare copy. On that note, thank you, Patrick Baz.
Thank you, Habibi. Thank you very much. It was a real pleasure. Thank you. I did talk for 2 hours.
Jad, you have to promise me two things now. You'll be here in the winter, and you'll keep your hair long enough for me to justify my ponytail. Because every time I see you, even on the beach when I run into you, I'm like, that's my guy. You're rocking it in your prime, so I need you to keep it long. I also forgot to mention one thing. Alexi Shadia is getting married next week.
Mabruk.
So, do we say Mabruk or not? I don't know. So if you have a photojournalist that can do his wedding, you won't be available for your own wedding. And it'll resume in the winter. Guys, again, thank you. Have a good night, Patrick.
Thank you very much.
It was an honor.
Thank you again, Habibi.
Thank you. Take care, guys.
Thank you.
Excellent.